So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and as we all just acknowledge, we're going to go ahead and record. As I said, also, we do not have a quorum tonight. We're not planning on voting on anything, so that's okay. So really the point of tonight's meeting is, as you saw on the agenda, to start the discussion about the Great Island purchase. I frankly have no more information than I think any of you do, nor that is Amy Barsanti, unfortunately. We've all read in the press that a contract's been signed already. We know that the Board of Selectmen okayed moving forward. We know P&Z confirmed that purchasing the property would be in accordance with the town plan. However, what I also know is that this is going to get fast-tracked through the RTM, or at least they're going to try to fast track it through RTM. So what Amy and I discussed is that we want to be ready with our questions, because I know we all have a lot of questions right now. So we thought it would be helpful to have this meeting now to basically get our initial thoughts on what information we need, so that way, when we're ready to start talking about, when they ask us to talk about it, we're prepared. So just so you know the timeline, the Rules Committee is expected to meet on June 13th and start assigning committees. It's fully expected that we'll be one of the committees assigned. On June 15th, there's going to be a town-wide public meeting to discuss the purchase. That is not an RTM meeting, it is a town public meeting. Then they're planning on voting at the RTM June 27th. So like I said, very fast. So when we're done tonight, I want to schedule our next meeting, which is going to need to be either June 16th, which will be the day after the townwide meeting, or June 23rd, which will give us a little more time to digest what came out of the meeting, but still be before the RTM vote, but close to the RTM vote. So I've started myself trying to figure out what we need to know. I mean, clearly we're going to need to see what the contract and the price is. One of my concerns is that I have not seen a map of what they're talking about purchasing. The map that is attached to the MLS listing is not reflective of the acreage that anyone has said is what's for sale. So I don't know what exactly the property is. I have tried actually quite hard to get a map before today, and have been told that P&Z doesn't have one, or at least the P&Z Commission doesn't have one. I was told to ask Jeremy for one. Jeremy was not able to give me one, or didn't give me one at least, and Monica has not given me one. So, you know, I'm not sure why that's been slow in coming, but that's my biggest piece right now. What I can do for you all, if it would be helpful, is I represented the seller in the Highland Farms. Is somebody not muted? Because I keep hearing myself backing.
Yeah, I hear the same thing. I'll let's everybody mute, and that will.
Okay. And then unmute when you're talking, unlike Mike just did. So I'll just finish up, and then I'll open up to everybody. When we did the Highland Farms purchase.
No, it's not us, because we're still getting the feedback and we're all muted.
No, I think Susan is not muted because she's on the phone.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Susan, if you can mute because you're on the phone. We might be getting feedback from your line.
Okay. Oh, that's better for me now. So I don't know if it's helpful to you all, but no, still getting it. Let's see. When I worked on so I was represented the seller in the Highland Farms matter. And so in that case, there's a lot of confidentiality that people want to keep around things. So that's one of the reasons why you don't necessarily have all the information right away. In that case, there were a number of restrictions put on the use by the seller. So I think that's another thing that's going to be of interest in this case, is whether or not there is going to be restrictions. The seller is not right next door to this property in the same way that they were at Highland Farms. But it's also a much more expensive purchase. It's a much larger purchase. So I do expect there to be a lot of questions, and I think a lot of questions about use. Use is not, though, part of, unless it's tied to being, the reason I brought up the restrictions by the seller, unless it's tied to restrictions by the seller, use isn't actually part of the approval process now. We can sort of talk about what we would like to see the property used for, and that should certainly be indicated to the town as we move along here, but they're going to have to go through an approval process for use after the purchase is concluded. That's not necessarily part of the purchase, because I certainly don't think it's going to be purchased as dedicated parklands, which would be the only way that would be sort of super restricted. So like I said, maybe if we want to sort of go around the horn, if people have sort of questions that they want to make sure are put towards the, I guess really the Rules Committee and towards the First Selectman and the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that we can try to make sure we have as much information to run with when we have our next meeting. I think that would be helpful. So does anybody want to, I'll mute myself if anyone wants to jump in.
Well, I actually, from watching the Planning and Zoning Commission approve that this was consistent with the town land use document, was that Jim Rand said, based on the learning from Highland Farm, and I remember in Mark Thorne's memory that it's farm and not farms, that he went back and did the research on the names. And so every time I hear farms, I think of Mark Thorne saying, no, it's Highland Farm. There's no S on it. I remember Jim Rand saying at the Planning and Zoning Committee that there would be no way that he would approve it unless it was designated farm, a park, because he didn't want somebody wanting to be able to, some future Board of Selectmen to be able to build a house, more houses on the structure, that the Planning and Zoning was going to insist, at least he, speaking for Planning and Zoning without a vote, wanted it designated as parkland.
Okay, well, I have a slightly different recollection of that meeting. I mean, he certainly indicated he would like to see that, but I certainly don't think that's going to be part of the contract that the town is going to dedicate it as parkland. There are a lot of hoops that happen when you dedicate something as parkland, as far as what the uses can then be later, and they want to keep that open. But you're right, I do think there's going to be a lot of interest in the town at restricting it as much as possible to limit the uses. But you may be right that he would prefer to, but I'm not sure that and that might be a Park and Rec's question, whether or not he actually has the authority to say that.
Michael and I are from District 2, and what I've heard from my neighbors is concern about what kind of traffic study and in and out, and just what it's going to mean to the traffic coming, because Binney Park makes Todd's Point a different, Todd's Point makes Binney Park a different town, with all the cars coming and going. And so I'll be interested in seeing what the engineers say in terms of parking at various assumptions. I went through and looked at, Connecticut Post has a list of every beach in Connecticut and what they charge out of town residents on a daily and a annual basis. And so I'm sure as part of the financial equation of how much we're losing in taxes, but how much we might be gaining in others is going to be an important part. My wife remembers renting apartments there at one. She said it was one place so nice she would want to rent the apartment, that there was the horse, one of the buildings, the horse has a 4-bedroom apartment or 4 apartments over the building.
There are multiple apartments over the stables, and there are also, I think, 3 other houses on the property aside from the mansion that are all rented out currently.
There are multiple rental houses in there. We looked at one of them, relatively small, when we were in between renovations, and we looked at one of them. They were kind of tired, but great location certainly.
Yeah,
And that's one of my questions. is, does town of Darien, are we going to be landlords?
Mhm.
What's going to happen with the renters once Darien?
Right. What's going to happen with the renters? And also there's a commercial barn down there right now, which in my zoning attorney hat, I can say is illegal. That needs to be dealt with in some fashion.
Hi, Amy.
Yep.
I'm Emily Selmore. I'm new to the committee. I don't know.
Sorry, I should have introduced myself.
Admittedly, I don't know much. I just have a question about kind of what we're all talking about here, about the whole debate over water access, out of town residents, and the whole theory over kind of it's unfair, they're charging, and how much clout we're going to have in the future to fight this battle.
Yeah.
And is this going to be a losing battle where, not that a battle, but like where we're going to end up losing and having to charge people only $5 to $10 per car, and then we're going to have a flood of out of town residents into this land. I think that's in Long Neck Point, in this beautiful part of town that's kind of quiet right now. My father actually used to live in Villa Juliet in the 1980s. After my parents' divorce, he moved into a tiny part of that big building right on the water. It was very beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of property. But that's what I would like to know. And I think a lot of people in town are going to be curious about that.
Right. Well, I think to your point, I would be concerned about any financial analysis myself that actually takes into account money that we would earn from parking, because it didn't get passed, but there was a pending legislation that would prohibit charging out of town residents more than in-town residents for parking at beaches. And that, while that legislation didn't pass, I think it's pretty clear from the discussion around it that it will come back in some form. So I think, I think that's, I guess, more of the finance committee's questions, but I think it's fair for us to.
And I think it's also important to know if there's a classification difference between this part. Is parkland mean beach, or is parkland mean park? Like, I don't know. This whole debate, does that encompass wooded land that's also on the water, or can that be classified differently to avoid this battle?
Right. Parklands. The definition of parklands doesn't have anything to do with what the ground is or if it's forest. It is whether or not the town puts the parklands designation on a piece of property, and therefore it cannot be used for anything other than a park. And once it is designated that way, if they want to use it for some other purpose, they have to dedicate some other land in town to park. So the town has been very reticent to designate any land as park because they don't want to get caught in that way. Just by way of example, I live right near Woodland Park, and there's actually a portion of Woodland Park that is not designated parkland. And we tried, the neighbors tried to get it designated, and the town refused because they wanted to keep that in their back pocket as a trade-off if they ever needed it. It came up in Cherry Lawn when they wanted to put the nature center there. They thought maybe that would not be compatible with parklands and they'd have to have some land to trade. So I do think, because they want to be as open as possible about uses, I sincerely doubt that again, we can ask for it. I'm not saying we can't, but I'm saying I sincerely doubt that the Board of Selectmen is considering putting a parklands designation on this piece of property. So, just that's my opinion, of course. So I think
the property is big enough that you could build a swimming pool and a neighbor couldn't hear anybody.
Well, there's the traffic. I mean, and I think that's an interesting question that you raised about traffic, because are they, I would be surprised if they're going to do a traffic analysis in connection with the purchase. They're going to do it in connection with uses. I don't recall them doing it. Right. I don't recall them doing a traffic analysis in connection with Highland.
Planning and zoning will.
That's the challenge, because they don't know
Probably
what
not in the next 2 weeks.
They don't know what the use is. So how do you do a traffic analysis against keeping it as a stable, keeping it as rental houses, putting in a town pool, selling off half the property to developers and using I mean, there's a million different scenarios. And until they narrow it down, I don't think any traffic study would be useful.
Right. And I think Dan just started to say, I don't think there's any way they could get one done between now and
That's
June
right.
27th.
He's absolutely right.
And it'd be meaningless anyway, because the traffic it wouldn't reflect what reality would be.
Right. Well, especially not until they know what they're going to do with it.
Yeah.
So I guess, were there other, so again, I think I wanted to try to get a list of sort of the questions we're going to ask. So I think, the talking about what's going to happen with the people that are tenants there now is very important. Were there some other questions, so are they going to designate it as parklands? Like I said, I think probably not, but I think it's a good question to ask. Any other questions from the group?
I had
I was just thinking
couple-
about how we phrase the questions, Amy. I think it's probably better to ask that question from the like, is it the intent to? Because I don't think if we ask things in the absolute, the answer is going to be no, or we haven't thought about it yet. But if we ask what is the intent, we may get a little more information out of it, if you know what I mean.
I don't know. I'm failing in the information. I asked for a map and I couldn't get that. So, but I'm hopeful. But before they send it to our committee, we'll get a little more. But that's a good point. I'll rephrase them all that way.
So a couple of things that had crossed my mind as I've been reading about this are one, security. Assuming that the town is not going to be landlords, that people are going to move out, that we're going to have, what are there, 5 buildings, I think, on this property?
I'm not sure I would assume we're not going to be a landlord, because we're a landlord in lots of other places in town.
No, that's true.
We have Allen O'Neill, we have town, we have all the, blah, blah, blah. So
But also, so all of these buildings are not occupied, though.
that's right.
And so, my question is security. I can see teenagers just chomping at the bit to go party in one of these houses.
They already do.
And people coming in off boats. I hate to say it, but this happens too.
Yeah, it's true.
And it already happens. Yeah.
So, suddenly the town will be liable for anything that happens there. So what would the town anticipate doing about security once we take ownership?
Over my shoulders, Taylor Swift's house, and the police did not anticipate that they were going to have to rebuild a rock wall for people not to be able to climb up the rocks to get onto her property. When one guy from Chicago did, and ended up sitting in her bedroom waiting for her to come home. She hadn't been there in 2 years, but he was waiting.
And then my other question, again, I haven't seen the property. I've seen some of the listings. Actually, Amy, if you have the MLS listing and if you could send that out, that might be helpful. But I don't know the elevation of the different buildings and what the flooding concerns might be for those.
Oh, a number of them are. There's one actually that actually sort of hangs over the water. They're definitely not FEMA compliant.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are my other 2 questions.
Right. And I think so that sort of raises actually the not just are we going to stay a landlord, but is the intention to keep all of the buildings on the property? I mean, I think all or any. There's been discussion of using the mansion such like a Waveney. I've heard that discussed more generally, but like you said, there are a number of other buildings, including a stable on there. Are they going to keep all of them?
Yeah, and FMB will all be over the loss in tax money versus the.
Mm-hmm.
You could get a lot back by selling 30 million of it. Although there are lots, I don't know if the lots on where Pear Tree Point School is, have any of those lots sold yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't think they have. I looked those up a little earlier and I think they have not sold.
Yeah, I don't think they have.
One question I have, Amy, is
Mm-hmm.
is maintenance. So, this comes back to use, it comes back to revenue streams, budgeting, but how will this exorbitant amount of money be budgeted lawn mowing, potentially pool maintenance, event hosting, like there's it's going to be a big budget. I guess my question is, what is the plan for, and that would come back to use, but I'm talking at a baseline. Just
even
baseline
before they do anything with it.
Fencing, repairing, anything like that. It's on a property of that size, it's going to be big anyway.
Mhm.
So would they designate a separate fund for maintenance, and would all revenues stream into that fund?
But that ties directly into the security question, because if the buildings aren't maintained and somebody injures themselves, we're going to have a big problem. All right. Any other questions for anyone that hasn't had a chance to talk yet, particularly? Kirk, Susan, Mary?
I think you guys answered everything. I was just thinking about insurance and the liability side of things. So I think that's going to be a huge issue for me. But everybody answered it. So
Maybe they can find an anonymous donor who wants to pay 50% of the cost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious that I haven't heard anything to say that the land trust is involved in this purchase at all. I would have that was sort of what I would have anticipated, that they would, fundraise for some portion of this, and then that would get back to the, protecting some of the land without it being designated parklands if it was designated land trust. But I haven't heard anything about that.
No.
Well, assuming they want some of this to be kind of a wild, undeveloped, where there is no use, it's just buffer and beauty, that would be a good place for the land trust to buy.
Right.
So the town wouldn't have to maintain it. It would lower the town's cost.
Right. But like I said, I haven't heard anything to indicate that they're involved.
Yeah, that's a big ticket for the land trust. Even a small piece of it.
All right. So so I think we're getting, already actually close to an hour. So what I think I'll do is maybe put together what our list of questions are and circulate them to everyone. So if you think of anything else, you can add them on. And basically, I'm going to be ready to go with these once we're sort of formally on the clock to discuss this, so that hopefully we can have answers to all of those questions before we meet next time. Good. So then I guess that brings up the next question is, do people have a preference between June 16th or June 23rd for our next meeting?
I'd go with the 16th when it's fresh on our mind.
Okay.
June 16th is middle school graduation, so I won't be able to be there.
Oh,
but go ahead without me. But yeah, that's Middlesex graduation.
16th. I can actually do the 16th. I'm going to be on the West Coast, but the time zone will help me.
Okay. Well, we may decide after the 16th that we want to have a second meeting on the 23rd. So, so yeah. So hopefully,
if we don't have enough information on the 16th, we want to punt it to the 23rd. But
true.
We can probably start till the 16th.
Yeah, let's put the 16th on the calendar, and then if we've got to cancel it and reschedule, we can. So as soon as I have any further information about the townwide meeting on the 15th, I'll obviously forward that out to everyone, because I think it'll be very helpful for all of us to be on that if we can, or watch it if there's a recording of it.
Great.
So, all right. Well, thank you all for your time. I'm sorry that this was less exciting, that I didn't have a whole bunch of answers for you, but I think we're all on the same page as far as our questions.
Yeah, this was helpful. Thank you, Amy.
There'll be a good crowd at the meeting on June 15th.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there will.
Good crowd. We're working on a solution that we've tested twice, and we're doing a third time, that we can do a combination of live and virtual. So hopefully, if it works at the RTM meeting a week from Monday, we can use it in the meeting on the 15th.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
See you later.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye.